Hi, everybody. So it's been a while since my last Sergeant at Arms, but I felt like there was a couple of things, one in particular, in the political process that needed to be addressed, and that is the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. And so it's been a couple of months now since all of that took place, and I've been meaning to actually weigh in on it, but just didn't do it. But the Sergeant is here to weigh in on it today. Where to begin? So he is now Justice Kavanaugh. Of course, during the hearings, Judge Kavanaugh gave his take on what was happening. But I think the thing that I really wanted to kind of dissect is all the facts with regard to this particular case. So the biggest issue was his behavior as a teenager in the early 80s, and whether that behavior precludes him from being a justice on the Supreme Court. The Me Too movement has taken over, and so now if you have anything in your background like that, you're probably going to be in trouble. So I think the thing that I'm most concerned about is, teenage boys will be teenage boys. That's still no excuse. If a woman has been assaulted, if a woman has been raped, if a woman has been put in a position where she feels like she has to provide something other than her intelligence and her skills and experience to get a job or to get some benefit, that's wrong. Hands down, no questions asked, that is wrong. In this situation, I think there's a little more to it than just kids at a party having fun. Now, we all know what happens at house parties, at teenage house parties. We all know what happens there. Bad things happen. None of it's very good. As parents don't like these things, but it happens. But we have to go back to it's a parent's job to make sure that their sons, let's just call it out as sons, learn how to be responsible men. We're also going to say that parents have to equip their daughters to be confident and strong-willed enough to say no, and if something like that happens to them, to speak up, because that's where we are now, which is there has to be more saying, no, this happened to me, and we can't let this go. So let's get back to this house party thing. So this accusation of Brett Kavanaugh is from 30 years ago. We know what happens at house parties. We know what young boys are like. When he was a kid, he was responsible for nothing. He didn't have anything he needed to be in charge of. There were no people that he had to be responsible for. That's where, for me, it becomes a little bit of an issue, because what he did as a teenager, quite honestly, I don't care about that. That's not relevant to me because he was a teenager and he was not working in his official capacity. Where it becomes an issue for me is the point at which he started working in his official capacity as an officer of the court. I'm going to define officer of the court as any person who works in a legal capacity of any sort. We're defining that as officer of the court. The point at which he became an officer of the court, that's where my investigation would have began. Because if in fact his parents didn't do a good job of teaching him to be a responsible young boy, he would not grow into a responsible young man and eventually would never change and still be a responsible older man. I think his history would reflect that somewhere. I am convinced that boys who start out that way continue being that way over the course of their lives. It happens in their personal lives, it happens in their professional lives. And so that to me is where the smoke is. I feel like the investigation shouldn't have been so much focused on that party and what happened at that party, because we know what happened at that party. And I think most of us believe Ms. Blasey Ford about what happened, and she knows how to identify a person. She knows what somebody looks like, particularly in a traumatic situation like that. I don't believe that she has mistaken identity on that. I do believe that she identified Brett Kavanaugh and that it was Brett Kavanaugh. I believe that. What I think becomes an issue is that happened when they were in high school. He was not working as an officer of the court. The point at which he started working as an officer of the court, I'm sure there are things that he did or said that lended itself to that kind of behavior, because if he did it then, he would have continued to do it because nobody ever called him on it. And so that's where it becomes a little bit of an issue for me. And there, you know, some people say, oh, but that, you know, it never should have happened. No, it never should have happened. But we have to say to ourselves, where do we draw the line and say, this is your official capacity? Many of the other men who have been accused and who have basically lost their careers, they did it in the context of their careers. That's the difference. I want to be able to say in the context of his career, that's where he went wrong. Now, having said that, the second part of this for me is, how did he respond to these accusations? In my book, the way he responded really kind of ruled him out for me, because he was very hostile. He was very antagonistic. I didn't see the kind of composure that a justice should have. Justices need to be unflappable. And I didn't see that in him. And so the combination to me of what kind of person is he, period, from the time that he was raised as a boy to a teenager to a man, and compare that with how did he perform in his official capacity. Those are the things that I would have investigated. And I feel like the FBI should have done that investigation, not an investigation of a party from 30 years ago with a bunch of teenagers. That to me was a waste of time. And that's why nothing came out of it. And that's why he is now a justice on the United States Supreme Court. So let me know what you think about this. I've gotten lots of people to say, no, I think it's relevant. I've gotten some people to say, no, it's not relevant. Republicans clearly have said, no, we don't think it was him, and we don't think that's relevant. And Democrats, of course, have said, no, we think it's all relevant, and it's horrible, and we don't think it should be him. So let me know what you think. Leave me comments, shoot me emails. Let's do some tweeting. Because I am still tweeting with the president and with the other members of the media, because these things are not going away. We still have 2 more years with this administration, and it's going to be a lively 2 years for sure. So, SGTATARMSUSA on Twitter, and I will see you next time. I will close this edition of the Sergeant at Arms.